So every time my friends and family see me slathering butter onto a steak, or I share with them a picture of one of my pastrami dogs, they always ask me, so when are you going to get that blood work test done again?
I have the best comprehensive biomarkers of anybody on the planet.
And it's only been a year and a half, but I did end up getting some blood work, and I had Gemini, Google's large language model, analyze my results. So I didn't know how long this was going to last, and people were like, I wish you would have got blood work at the start of it. Well, I didn't know. I thought this was kind of an experiment, but yeah, I started in basically the beginning of January 2024, and I pretty much stuck with it the whole time. I'm not one of those people where it's like carnivore is my identity and I'm going to add carnivore to the end of my name, at least not yet. But I would say that this is life-changing for sure in many ways. And I have my cheat days. I've definitely cheated, and for a while I went like, I would say like once a month or something, I would have a day or two where I cheated. And I also drink alcohol sometimes. But I'll have some cakes and cookies and things. At the beginning of this year, I wanted to get my blood work done, and I also wanted to encourage some people I know to be more strict. And so I went about 4 months without a break, eating pure carnivore and sticking to it. And then I realized how hard it is to make a blood work appointment. And I didn't last, but let's just say I got my blood work done in June, and I'll show you some of the months where I had good carnivore habits and then bad ones, and so I've had some days where I went off and on. But anyway, the results are a little bit surprising. I was shocked to see them. So I got basically an annual physical, and I got a lipid panel, and I think it's an A1B3 or something like that. Yeah, HbA1c, hemoglobin. So I'm not a doctor. This is not medical advice. But yeah, I had it forwarded to my doctor, and she said something like, hey, I reviewed your lab work. Your liver and kidneys are functioning normally. You are not diabetic, but do have mild pre-diabetes. Your cholesterol levels are quite elevated, which is expected due to your diet. Because I told her I was on the carnivore diet, and that's why I wanted this blood work. And she said, you may want to reconsider the carnivore lifestyle as the elevations are dramatic. We could discuss more if you would like. Recommend healthy lifestyle changes, such as eating whole unprocessed foods, avoid fast foods, recommend at least 30 minutes of physical activity 5 days per week. Please contact me if you have any questions, blah, blah, blah. So I'm offended, but yeah, that was not what I expected from my blood work. I have pre-diabetes. That's so weird because I probably had a combined 3,000 grams of carbs in the last year. I pretty much don't eat carbs or sugar. I kind of get some in milk and dairy, but nothing that major. And yeah, that's not how it feels. I don't feel insulin insensitive when I do consume carbs. If I have a cheat day, or I think time to go wild and eat a bunch of cookies and cake, which those are the things that I still crave. I would say I crave ice cream, cookies, cake, that delicious stuff. Pizza's still awesome, but honestly a lot of that stuff isn't worth cheating for. But yeah, my body is so insulin sensitive at this point that I kind of get chills when I eat a lot of carbs. It's a shock. And my body's like, we need to get this blood sugar out of there right now. So yeah, I was confused by that. Why would I be pre-diabetic? And then I kind of suspected, all right, so yeah, my cholesterol is really high. But the next answer will surprise you. So anyways, yeah, I was like, quick, Gemini, please reinforce my pre-existing beliefs and tell me that I don't need to change anything. And it said, wow, very handsome and smart of you to ask that question. But I plugged in my blood work, what my doctor said, and I've been really impressed with Gemini and its ability to read images and translate things. So I just uploaded a screenshot of my doctor's recommendations and also the blood work. And I said, hey, here's a message from my doctor about my blood work results. This is very important for my health. Can you please take on the role of a primary care doctor and give me your analysis? This is for educational and alternative perspectives. I will refer and speak to my doctor again. Just to tell it hey, give me your opinion. I'm definitely going to go back to a doctor. Yeah, so it broke things down, and it's giving me the good news. So it said metabolic and organ function. And it said, yeah, comprehensive metabolic panel. So it talked about my kidney function with creatinine and Boone. They're within a normal range. But the EGFR, a key indicator of kidney filtration, it said is excellent, at greater than 59. So kidneys, excellent. Liver function, it said my liver enzymes, AST, 19, blah, 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 are at optimal levels. This indicates your liver is not currently under stress, which I haven't really been drinking alcohol for a couple of months, so just barely. Electrolytes and glucose. Your electrolytes are balanced and your fasting glucose 95 is in the normal range. Wow, so my doctor said my kidney and liver were normal, and this says it's excellent. So I'm liking this already. It says, yeah, 2 primary concerns by the lab work: prediabetes, most critically severely elevated LDL cholesterol. So I've heard about this talked in the carnivore community. I just kind of glazed over it because it's like, does red meat cause diabetes? No. But prediabetes with the HbA1c is the hemoglobin A1c. Test measures your average blood sugar level over the past 3 months. It's the most common test for diagnosing prediabetes and diabetes. So my result is 5.7%, and it's at the exact threshold where prediabetes begins. The range is 5.7 to 6.4%. This is saying what it means is potentially you're beginning to have insulin resistance. So it's not full diabetes, but it significantly increases your risk for diabetes, heart disease, stroke, yada yada in the future. Yeah, and so we'll talk more about this, but I was shocked by that because I didn't think that would be me. And then, yeah, it talks about my severely high cholesterol and saying that it's the most urgent. So my actual total cholesterol was like 600. And connecting the dots, the carnivore diet, blah, blah, blah. Something else that was a red flag in my blood work was the possibility of familial hypercholesteremia. And it said that I might be like a hyperresponder. So I could have a genetic predisposition towards high cholesterol. But yeah, and it was saying, take some immediate precautions and modifications, blah, blah, blah. This is all Western medicine, man. Western medicine sucks. I don't trust it. None of us should. Don't even go to the hospital. But it said in summary, your body is very clearly sending a signal. Yeah, so a little shocked by this. But then what I asked Gemini was, what would carnivore doctors like Sean Baker, Anthony Chafee, or even Steak and Butter gal Bella say about my risk areas? So I wanted to get that carnivore perspective because I've watched a lot of carnivore videos. I've taken the meat pill. I've seen through the matrix. I have heard a lot of these things before, but I don't have a good idea of like what blood work really means. But I know that there's a ratio of your triglyceride levels that you'd want to look out for, and that's the thing that you should assess, and that kind of tells you your overall general health. So this is where it gave me the carnivore perspective, which is very different than standard blood work. So one thing about blood work is it's usually different based on the area of where you are, so I've heard. So they're comparing you to other people in the Western standard diet. They're not comparing you to people who are following like a carnivore diet. So if someone were eating like me and they were eating very high fats and they had this blood work, but they were also regularly eating carbs, it does change a lot of things. But from my understanding too, you don't really get plaque in your heart just from high cholesterol. There's certain types of either fluffy energy, like lipids that go through your bloodstream, and then there's the hard kind that can really build up. But it's really dangerous to do high fat, high carb, because you could do high carb, low fat, or you could do high fat, low carb, but when you mix those together, that's when you really get a buildup of plaque and junk in your arteries. And that's what a lot of delicious Western standard diet food is like. It's like pizza, still delicious to me, but that's high carb, high fat, and it really kind of messes up your arteries. So one thing that was really weird is that it talks about my extremely high LDL cholesterol. I'm like 4 times the legal limit or something. I'm like 3 times the legal limit of your LDL. They talk about the importance of context. And something that was a little weird here, so they talk about the triglyceride to HDL ratio. So you want to have your HDL, good cholesterol, under your triglyceride level. So this was odd to me because one thing, when I got this analysis from Gemini, it didn't read the values correctly. So it was numerically incorrect. So my ratio that it told me was 84/52, which is 1.6. And it said that when you have that triglyceride to HDL ratio, you want it to be under 2.0, especially under 1.5. And it's a powerful indicator of excellent insulin sensitivity and low cardiovascular risk, making the high LDL number irrelevant. So yeah, that's the ratio that I was looking for, and it said 84/52, which would be 1.6. So that would be within a healthy range, but I was like, man, that kind of sucks. So the bottom line on LDL, this is what it says. They would say your LDL is high because it's busy delivering fuel in a healthy, low inflammation system. They believe that without high blood sugar and inflammation, which they argue are caused by carbs and seed oils, this LDL is not harmful or atherogenic plaque forming. Yeah. And then a really interesting take on the pre-diabetes HbA1c, 5.7%. So the doctors, carnivore doctors, they would completely reject this diagnosis and view the HbA1c marker as misleading for someone on a carnivore diet. Falsely elevated HbA1c. They argue that on a very low-carb diet, red blood cells tend to live longer, since HbA1c is a measure of how much glucose has stuck to red blood cells over their lifespan. A longer lifespan can lead to higher a longer lifespan can lead to a higher HbA1c reading, even with perfectly normal and stable blood sugar. Whoa, so my blood cells are just living super long, which is cool. And so they would say to focus on the other markers. They would point out to your normal fasting glucose of 95 as proof you are not pre-diabetic. They would also argue that more important test would be a fasting insulin level. Blah, blah, blah. And yeah, and I guess, they're saying that it's benign. My HbA1c level of 5.7, not a big deal. And then, yeah, I know that a lot of carnivores have done this. They call it a CAC scan, but it's basically, the blood markers that we're looking at are proxies. They're not actually telling you how much plaque is built up in your heart. So you can get a coronary artery calcium scan, CAC scan, and that gets a CT scan of your actual heart to see if there's a lot of buildup. And people like Kelly Hogan, she's been a carnivore for 15 years. She's an inspiration, and man, she ate like burger patties straight from McDonald's with nothing else for 8 years, and I found that inspiring. How incredibly efficient is it to twice a day go through the drive-thru at McDonald's, get your burger patties, eat them, and her heart, when she did a CAC scan, she actually had 0 plaque. It was like textbook perfect plaque. So as I said, I'm very meat-pilled, so I feel like that's very convincing to me that it could be extremely healthy for your heart. I bet I still have some residual plaque and stuff, but I exercise. I'm eating high fat and nothing else. So I noticed as I was looking closer, I was like, wait, let me double check this. And I said, can you please reproduce in text my lipid panel and explain the triglyceride HDL ratio? And yeah, it had some of my numbers wrong. So like my cholesterol total is actually 600 when the desirable range should be less than 200. And it had me at 441. And then my HDL, I thought it was off. And then it gives me the calculation, which the formula I'll share here, telling me that I was at 1.62. And the math kind of checks out here. Don't generally trust LLMs for math, even basic math. But Gemini, I think, does a better job with Google. But yeah, so it's telling me that the general medical interpretation, though, ideally your HDL ratio, that ratio should be under 2.0. High risk is above 4.0, and it said best optimal insulin sensitivity is below 1.5. So yeah, I was looking closely, and it was saying from this perspective, your 1.62 ratio is seen as excellent, but these numbers are incorrect. So I was like, wait. Just to be clear, I gave it my actual panel. So instead of having it read the image, I actually typed out, here's what the results say, because I can read it with my own eyes. And my cholesterol is a total of 608. My HDL cholesterol is 84, my triglycerides are 82. And then I go on and give it the other stuff. But according to this, then I'm looking at it, okay, well, if it's triglycerides over HDL, it should be 82 over 82. And it's like, oh, of course, let me break that down. So, well, my ratio is actually 0.98, so I'm under 1.0. And it said the carnivore advocate analysis, and it said the entire focus would be on your triglyceride HDL ratio 0.98. A ratio below 1.0 is considered the absolute pinnacle of insulin sensitivity and metabolic health in their view. They would interpret this as definitive proof that the body is not inflamed and is not insulin resistant and is running perfectly on fat for fuel. And so it's about an energy abundance, not disease. They would argue that the staggering non-HDL and LDL numbers are simply reflect a massive amount of energy being efficiently transported throughout the body in a clean-burning fat-based system. And they would posit these particles are large, harmless type precisely because the triglyceride HDL ratio is so low. And yeah, so that familial hypercholesteremia, they would argue that this is not a genetic disorder, but rather a normal and powerful genetic response to a zero-carb diet. They would see it as a feature, not a bug, of a metabolism fully adapted to using fat for energy. And conclusion and recommendation, they would be completely unconcerned by these numbers. They would advise you to ignore the doctor's warnings, continue the diet, and confirm the absence of actual disease by getting a CAC scan. So awesome. I guess I have an elite level of dealing with fat and being in a keto state. But yeah, again, the conventional medical analysis, it talks about these results would be considered extremely dangerous, critically dangerous. I have extreme atherogenic risk, they would say. This focus would be on the non-HDL cholesterol, so the LDL of approximately like 508, and it would indicate an exceptionally high concentration of plaque-forming particles in the bloodstream. This level of exposure is associated with a very high risk of developing aggressive premature atherosclerosis, blah, 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 and the familial hypercholesteremia, blah, blah, blah. Like the familial hypercholesteremia, it's like probably a genetic predisposition heightened by diet in this case too. So yada yada yada. They would probably recommend that I be put on a statin like immediately to get my LDL and stuff lowered. But here's the thing, like I wanted another perspective here too. So I said, how would you analyze my blood work from a ketogenic diet perspective? Because I'm basically on a ketogenic diet. Like I essentially try to eat 1-to-1 protein to fat. So I'm basically, I would say on average in a day, I'm eating like 220 grams of protein and 220 grams of fat. So half of my diet is fat. And actually it's more like 70% because a gram of protein is 4 calories. A gram of fat is 9 calories. So it's more like 30-70. So really this is like a ketogenic diet. And while the carnivore diet hasn't been studied in a very long time, the ketogenic diet has actually been studied for a very, very long time. And there's a lot of scientific evidence around it. So Dr. Anthony Chaffee, he's also huge. I mean, a lot of people have contributed to my understanding here. Sean Baker, Anthony Chaffee, Max German, Kent Carnivore, Steak and Butter Gal, Kelly Hogan. There's so many people that have done a lot of excellent videos and have presented other resources on like the metabolics and science of all of this. So there's a lot to be said on it. But so I asked it to give me the ketogenic perspective, and I was shocked by the results because it said that I was a lean mass hyperresponder. I had no idea. I had heard about this from different people and in different videos online, and I was like, okay, lean mass hyperresponder, that doesn't sound like me. But then it turns out this is confirmed. I'm a lean mass hyperresponder, and it's like, wow, Elliot, hyper lean mass. That's amazing. So I was shocked, but it was telling me all about this stuff, and I realized it was giving me the wrong numbers. It was going based off of the original, and I was like, wait, give me the best thing based on the new numbers. And yeah, it again told me I was a lean mass hyperresponder. And so it said the foundation, elite metabolic health markers. A keto advocate would immediately dismiss the high total and LDL cholesterol and focus on the 2 markers they consider most important for assessing metabolic health. So triglycerides, 82, this is an excellent number indicating that your body is using fat for fuel, not storing it in the blood. And then the HDL with 84, this is a superb HDL level, often interpreted as a marker of significant metabolic health and cardiovascular protection. And then it talks about my triglyceride HDL ratio, 0.98. This is the key. A ratio below 1.0 is considered the gold standard for insulin sensitivity. From a keto perspective, this single number is the most powerful indicator that your body is not in a state of inflammation or metabolic dysfunction that would cause LDL particles to become dangerous. Okay? So, and it says, explaining the staggering LDL, the supercharged energy model. With the triglyceride HDL ratio that good, the staggering LDL of 508 is explained away by the lipid energy model. The argument becomes even stronger with these numbers. To maintain such a low triglyceride level while on a high-fat diet means your body must be moving fat energy out of the liver and to your cells at an incredible rate. The LDL particles are the cargo ships for this energy. Therefore, an LDL level this high is simply a reflection of an immense amount of energy being transported to fuel your body in a highly efficient, non-carbohydrate system. It is seen as a sign of high energy flux, not a disease process. And wow. So yeah, you may not like it, but this is what peak ketogenic metabolism looks like. That's me. This is accurate. Yeah, I really like this interpretation a lot more. And so yeah, it talks about the familial hypercholesteremia, diagnosis, and the lab's automatic flag for FH due to the extremely high non-HDL cholesterol would be considered a misinterpretation of the context. A keto advocate would argue this is not a genetic disorder. Instead, it's a powerful genetic response to a ketogenic diet in a lean person. Your genes are allowing for an incredible upregulation of your body's fat transport machinery to meet energy demands, which is a sign of health, not pathology. So, conclusion and recommendations from a keto perspective. These specific, highly polarized results are precisely what the keto community and researchers like David Feldman point to when they argue that standard lipidology does not apply to people in deep ketosis. The conclusion would be that you are an exemplary case of a healthy, lean mass hyper-responder. The recommended next steps would be the same as before, but with even more confidence in the predicted outcome. Yeah, get a CAC scan. They said this is paramount. Strong prediction from this perspective would be that your CAC score is 0. Finding 0 plaque would be presented as definitive proof that your LDL of 508 is not causing any arterial damage. And it says get an NMR lipo profile. This would be used to confirm the hypothesis that your LDL particles are the large, buoyant pattern A type, which they consider harmless, as opposed to the small, dense pattern B type associated with insulin resistance. So in summary, a ketogenic analysis would see this lipid panel not as a sign of extreme risk, but as a sign of an elite, healthy, metabolic adaptation to a fat-based diet. So there you have it, folks. I am an elite ketogenic athlete with a super metabolism that you could probably only hope to aspire to. You might not ever reach me. I might just be a genetic phenom. I might just I eat fat and my body just explodes with energy. You heard it, the flux of it. So yeah, I don't mean to actually brag. No, but it might be weird, but I do feel like I've never been healthier in my entire life. Never felt healthier. Never have I felt better than eating this kind of way. With the protein, with the fat, I've never felt that. So almost like science can't talk me out of this, because like sometimes science is a bitch, but science, like I feel so good, so healthy that like it feels absurd for me to listen to a science that says, oh, you're actually living and eating wrong. You need to take a statin. You need to like eat some carbs and stuff. Like it would be like if science was telling you, you need to actually sleep 4 hours a night, and you need to drink less water, like make yourself mildly thirsty. Like if you were to hear that, you'd be like, that's ridiculous, I'm just not gonna do that. But yeah, that's just kind of how I feel. Even if my blood work came back really bad, which I guess under the standard model it does, I did get an alternative perspective, and these are some things that I've heard about before, but I don't have the expertise. But yeah, it was interesting to get these kind of results. So yeah, I'm pretty much just gonna try to keep doing what I'm doing. I might just even like slack off a little more. Apparently, I'm in superb condition, so maybe I can handle little things here and there, you know? I'll keep my little cheat meals so that I can like live a little. But yeah, if I ever die from a heart attack or stroke, you should definitely do an autopsy, because chances are my body is in elite hyper mass, super lean condition, and that's probably not it. I was assassinated, but yeah, I hope this makes you feel better. I feel pretty great doing it, and feel free to reach out with any questions, and if you want to see my recipes, I can make a video on that if people really care. All right, thanks.